Hey everyone, welcome back to library. So we are in the exciting story of the Sisters Grimm, the Fairy Tale Detectives. There is our book. It is by Michael Buckley, and look at that. We're over halfway. So we are on our way. Let's see. We're on chapter 8. So what just happened? There were the three little pigs who are the deputy and the sheriff, right? The deputies and the sheriff, the policemen, they were trying to get Daphne, Puck, and Sabrina, right? But they were able to get out and they found Jack. Jack, the mighty giant killer, right? He is in jail, and he said they went there because they need help to, find Granny. But he said they'll only help him. He will only help them if they get him out of jail. So now Daphne and Sabrina are like, how on earth are we going to get him out of jail? So let's find out. Let's see what happens. Do you think they're going to get him out of jail? What do you think? Here we go. Sabrina gasped. You want us to help you break out of prison? Jack nodded his head. Quite right. How are we supposed to do that? Sabrina asked. Easy. You go in the front door and distract the guard. Then the little one here will hit him in the gob with a club or something and snatch his keys. I'm 7 years old. I can't hit someone with a club and not in the gob, whatever that is, Daphne cried. Sure you can. Deputy Crane isn't going to put up a fight. He's daft in the head and jumpy as a flea. But if he happens to put up a fight, all you have to do is hit him in the shins. He's fall over like a sack of potatoes, Jack replied. The shins like right above your foot, kind of. She is not hitting anyone with a club, Sabrina said. Well, if saving your granny and her pal isn't that important to you, I can just stay in the nick. That's like the jail, but British. Sabrina looked into Jack's hopeful face. How could this odd little man actually be the key to Granny and Mr. Canis's survival? It just didn't seem possible. But on the other hand, the note Granny had left told them that the mirror would have all the answers they needed. After 2 days of disbelieving everything the old woman had told her, Sabrina didn't feel like being proven wrong again, especially when so much was riding on the outcome. So, girls, what's it gonna be? If I could do it myself, I would have already, but the Bobby took my lock-picking kit when he put the cuffs on me. Smart on his part, too. There isn't a door Jack can't open. You say there's only one deputy? Yes, Jack insisted. And he happens to be Ichabod Crane, the guy from the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Not so much legend as a true story, but yes. Well, we'll get you out of here, but we're going to do it my way, Sabrina declared. No one is going to get hurt. Deal? Jack frowned, but thrust his hand out the window. He shook Sabrina's hand and smiled. So, boss, what's the plan? First, I'm going to need your shirt. When Sabrina opened the front door to the police station, her heart was pounding faster than it had ever pounded. They were taking a huge chance, especially with Sheriff Hampstead and his deputies searching for them. By now, Crane had to know the girls were on the loose. 2 kids dressed in bright orange monkey sweatshirts, flying around on a magic carpet with a 200-pound Great Dane, weren't going to be too hard to spot. On the upside, what they were about to do was the sneakiest things the girl had ever tried. It was nice to be challenged every once in a while. When the door swung open, Sabrina half expected to find Hampstead, Borman, and Swinehart waiting for them. But luckily, the station was empty, except for a tall, painfully thin man with a gigantic hooked nose, thin lips, and an Adam's apple that bobbed up and down, like men have. It's called an Adam's apple right here. Ichabod Crane looked just like the story had described him, and he was fast asleep, sitting in a chair with his feet propped up on his desk. Now, I don't know this fairy tale actually, but I'm assuming it has something to do with sleep. You know what I mean? Okay, so I just looked up Ichabod Crane because this might be important to the story. So Ichabod Crane, he was a teacher, and he was very tall and skinny. Another word for that is like lanky, not muscular type situation. And he's not a brave guy, okay? He was he got scared easily. And in the story, apparently there was a headless horseman. And that really, really scared him, and he believed in the headless horseman, and it was just not good. So anyway, I think those are very important to know for this story, is that there's a guy who's not very brave. That's Ichabod. And he's very scared of this idea that there'd be a headless horseman. But it doesn't exist. It doesn't actually really exist. It's like if you believed in ghosts or like the boogeyman, but it's not really out there. You know what I mean? That's what it's like. Here we go. Let's find out. Sabrina found the light switch and flipped it off, drowning the room in murkiness. She gestured behind her, and the carpet drifted in, hovering 2 feet off the ground and carrying its own headless horseman. Daphne, sitting on Elvis's back and wearing Jack's shirt so that her head was hidden inside. "He's gonna figure this out," Daphne whispered. "It's our only shot," Sabrina replied. She crouched down behind an empty desk and cupped her hands around her mouth. She used her feet to kick the door shut, and it slammed so loudly the poor man fell backward over in his chair. Once he was on his hands and knees, he rubbed his eyes and looked around in the dark. "Hey, who turned out the lights?" he called in a whiny, high-pitched voice. "Crane!" Sabrina moaned in the deepest voice she could produce. The carpet slowly drifted across the room, carrying its headless passenger. "You!" the deputy cried in horror. "You're supposed to be gone!" "I have returned," Sabrina croaked. The dark room was creating a very believable nightmare. Crane scurried around the room, hiding behind the desks and chairs the best he could. "Crane, you cannot hide from me. I am the headless horseman. I see all." The deputy screamed and continued to crawl, but the carpet hunted him slowly around the room. I'm law enforcement now," Crane shouted, trying to muster all of his courage. "A defender of the peace. I can arrest you for riding a horse without a head. That's a serious crime in this town," he cried. "Your laws mean nothing to me. I've come for something, Crane, and I will have it," Sabrina bellowed. What do you want?" the deputy cried. "Your head," Sabrina groaned. Crane burst into tears. "No, please, not my head," he begged. "Very well. If not your head, I'll take something else." Anything, whatever you want." "I want the keys to the jail." Crane was silent for several moments. Why do you want the keys?" "Would you prefer I take your head instead?" Sabrina moaned, just as an unlucky bounce of the carpet knocked Daphne off of Elvis's back. She fell to the ground, knocking a trash can into a radiator. The sound couldn't have been more appropriate, but Daphne was down for the count. Unable to see, she flailed in her costume, causing more commotion and sending a computer crashing to the floor. Crane, who seemed to think that this was part of the headless horseman's attack, shouted, Here are the keys!" And he tossed them at Daphne's feet. "Now go, or I will change my mind," Sabrina said. Crane leaped to his feet and ran, not noticing Sabrina as he rushed out the station door. Once she was sure he was gone, Sabrina stood up and turned on the lights. Daphne was still rolling around, unable to see anything. "Get me out of this!" the girl cried. Sabrina unhooked the top buttons and Daphne's head popped out. Elvis, who had stepped off the carpet, was ready with a lick of the face. "You were very convincing," Sabrina laughed as she helped her sister to her feet. Daphne reached down and scooped up the keys. "Let's get him out of here." Sabrina rolled up the carpet, flung it over her shoulder, and the two girls raced to find Jack's cell. Down a long hallway at the back of the building were 2 jail cells. The one on the left was empty, but the one on the right held Jack. He stood with his arms reaching through the bars as the girls entered the rooms. "Give me the keys," he pleaded, but before they could, Elvis lunged angrily at the cell. Growling and barking wildly, the dog sniffed and snarled at Jack. "Elvis, it's okay, he's a friend," Daphne said, which seemed to calm the dog down, but still his nose was snipping and at full alert. Sabrina handed Jack the keys, and he sorted through them. "Oh my, I told you it would work," he bragged. He found the right key, stuck it in the lock, and turned it from the inside. The door clicked and it pushed open. "Crane, like he'd seen the devil himself," Sabrina said proudly. "Just kidding, let me redo that." "Crane ran like he saw the devil himself," Sabrina said proudly. "I've seen the devil, and you're not him," a voice said from down the hallway. Sabrina turned and found Deputy Crane standing in the doorway, blocking their exit. He was angry and he was shaking. "Listen, Crane, let's just pass and no one will get hurt," Jack said. "Get back in your cell, Jack!" the deputy ordered, pulling his billy club from his strap and swinging it threateningly. "Sorry, Icky, I wish I could help you, but I've just been hired for a rescue mission. Now, are you going to let me pass, or are we going to have to get rough?" Jack threatened. Daphne grabbed his undershirt and yanked on it. "You promised that no one would get hurt." Jack scowled. "I wouldn't hurt him badly," he said. "Do your worst," Crane stammered as he backed up a step. "Crane, I mean it. I'm staying in this jail. I'm not, I say." "Bring it on, you washed up has-been," Jack laughed. "Oh, that's what I am, a washed up has-been. I'd watch what you say, Icky. Things can change in the blink of an eye." "Not in Ferryport Landing, Jack." The two stared at each other for a long time. Sabrina could almost feel the heat and rage in their eyes. "Cockpit, let's wrap this up," Jack commanded, and the carpet lifted off Sabrina's shoulder. It darted down the hallway and, like an anaconda, wrapped Crane inside of it. He fumbled and fought, but he couldn't break free. Jack walked over to the rug and patted it lightly. "Nothing personal, Icky, but destiny awaits," he said. He grabbed an end of the carpet and pulled it roughly, causing Crane to spin away like a top. After several rotations, the skinny man collapsed to the floor, overcome by dizziness. Jack set the carpet on the floor and stepped onto it. "All right, ladies," he said as he extended his hand to help the girls onto the rug. Elvis rushed to join them and stood like a guard dog between the girls and Jack. "Carpet up," Sabrina said, and it rose a few feet and then sank slowly back down like a balloon with a hole in it. "Why aren't we going up?" Sabrina cried. "We must be too heavy," Jack groaned. "Can we lose the dog?" Elvis answered him with a threatening snarl. "Very well, Carpet. Take us to the Grimm house." Though it was weighed down, the carpet didn't lack any of its speed. It zipped along 3 feet off the floor, down the hallway, through the main room, and out the front door of the police station. It sailed across the parking lot and made a left into the street, causing a pickup truck to screech to a stop. As they passed, the girls waved a friendly, sorry gesture to the bewildered driver. "That was almost too easy," Jack said, but no sooner had he puffed out his chest than the sound of a police siren wailed in their ears. A moment later, a police car turned around the corner and raced in the group's direction. Ichabod Crane was behind the wheel. "Tenacious, isn't he?" Jack said. "Tenacious?" Daphne asked. "It means persistent," Sabrina said. "And what does persistent mean?" Daphne asked. "It means he's not going to give up." "And I wouldn't have it any other way," Jack assured them. "Carpet faster!" Close behind, Crane turned on his squad car's flashing lights. Is this the best idea?" Sabrina shouted, holding on to an end of the carpet as they sailed between the cars and ran through a red light. We're attracting a lot of attention. It's about this time this little bug saw some action, Jack cried out happily. Ferryport Landing, you haven't seen anything yet. Sabrina heard a horrible crunching sound behind them and turned back to see what could have made such a loud noise. What she saw stole the breath from her lungs. The road behind them began to rise like a massive wave rolling in from the ocean. It was followed by another horrible crunching sound. What's happening? She cried as she watched parked cars get tossed aside like toys. We're luck, ladies, Jack said. We've already found our giant. Suddenly, a giant foot planted itself in the middle of Main Street. The impact caused windows in nearby businesses to shatter. The ground exploded and a gas main underneath the street burst, shooting flames into the air. What do we do? Daphne said. We have two choices. Stand and fight and die a horrible, messy death, or run, Jack said. Carpet, get us out of here, Sabrina shouted, and the little rug jumped to speed. Unfortunately, the giant was not discouraged by how fast the group was making its getaway. A single stride put the monster right behind them, even when the rug increased its speed again. And with every step the big monster took, the pavement crumbled beneath him. Electrical wires snapped, spraying sparks everywhere. The few drivers on the road at that early hour lost control of their cars and went off the road. Jack turned in to see the chaos, and a broad grin came to his face. Finally, this is getting interesting. Ha ha, he laughed. The carpet took a sharp left turn, and Sabrina felt lucky that she hadn't tumbled off when she noticed that Daphne was no longer sitting next to her. In fact, Daphne was hanging from the back of the carpet, holding on desperately with both hands. Jack! Sabrina cried. The spiky-haired legend reached down and grabbed the little girl by the back of her sweatshirt and pulled her onto the carpet. Blimey, this bed's better than a roller coaster! Jack laughed as he sat the girl safely on the carpet. Daphne hugged her sister. It was the first time Sabrina had ever felt her sister shake from fear. She didn't like it. We're going to get ourselves killed, she shouted as the carpet narrowly missed being crushed by a delivery truck with chickens. Nonsense! We can't die like this. We're immortal, Jack replied. You're immortal. We're not. We have to get off this road, Sabrina demanded. So if any of you guys are scared, you're like, oh my word, this is so scary. There's cars running off the road. Remember that all of the people besides Daphne and Sabrina, they're immortal, which means they can't die in Ferryport Landing. So as long as they're in that city, they can't die. So it might be scary, but they also know they can't die. So that's kind of, but Sabrina and Daphne have to be careful because they're regular old humans. They're not fairy tale characters. I see, must be quite a pain to be human, but the carpet picks the road. Just then, an 18-wheeler pulled directly into their path and stopped. Carpet up! Everyone shouted. The carpet slowly rose, sputtered as if it were the little train that couldn't. We're not going to make it, Sabrina shouted. Lie down flat, Jack commanded. You can't mean what I think you mean. Jack nodded, and the two girls reluctantly laid on their backs. Elvis, play dead, Jack said, and the dog laid on his side. The little girl turned a worried face to her sister. He's not going to do what I think he's going to do, is he? Carpet down! Jack shouted, and the carpet fell from the sky until it was literally skidding across the pavement. Its momentum carried the group underneath the truck to the other side and down the street. When they sat up again, the young man was already laughing until he looked up and he saw the street cleaner barreling towards them. Carpet up! They all shouted, and the little rug struggled higher, higher, narrowly missing the boiling hot water and sharp bristles the machines used to clean the streets. The carpet continued to rise until it had cleared the vehicle. Sabrina sat up and turned around. Ichabod Crane was out of his car, angrily ordering the owners of the 18-wheeler and the street cleaner to move. Unfortunately, the traffic problems did little to stop the giant. Its monstrous foot soared high above the commotion and landed only yards from the carpet. "That thing is gonna kill someone!" Sabrina shouted. "Carpet, we have to get away from the main road!" The carpet made an abrupt turn toward Ferryport Landing's farm community. The giant followed closely behind, and the little rug dodged each deadly footfall. Several times the ugly brute reached out to squash the group in his hands, but each time the carpet zipped out of his reach. He grunted and roared at them, but eventually became exhausted by the chase, and he gave up, shaking his fist in the air and roaring with frustration. "Don't cry, big boy," Jack shouted to the giant as he disappeared behind them in the horizon. "You'll be seeing me again very soon." That was quite, we got to keep going, but my word, I think the carpet was the real hero in that situation. That's what happens. As the magic carpet coasted up the driveway, it was barely 6 inches off the ground and had lost all of its kick. When the group finally stepped off of it, the beautiful little rug dropped to the ground and rolled itself up, just as it had been delivered to the girls. Daphne leaned over and picked it up gingerly, the way someone would a tired kitten, and cradled it in her arms. "Poor little thing, it's all worn out," she said, cooing. Sabrina looked toward the forest. Hampstead's squad cars were still perched in the tall trees behind the house, but he and his men were nowhere to be seen. Reaching into her pocket, Sabrina removed Granny Relda's enormous keyring and began the tedious job of unlocking all the bolts. Jack watched attentively until she had unlocked every single one. But before Sabrina could say the magic word that gained them the entrance, Daphne pulled her aside, cupped her hand over her big sister's ear, and whispered, "Should we let him in?" It was a fair question. Every time they had broken one of Granny Relda's rules, they had regretted it. But they were in a tough situation. Jack was probably the only person in the world who could confront a giant, and he had offered to help. "I don't think we have much of a choice," Sabrina whispered. Back, she made a fist and knocked on the door. "We're home." Jack cocked an eyebrow in confusion. "Family tradition," Sabrina said in hopes of throwing him off. "Granny does it, and it makes Daphne laugh, so I picked it up too." Daphne faked a laugh. "Ha!" Jack shrugged. "Whatever." "What is he doing here?" Puck said as he floated down from the sky. Jack turned around and eyed the flying boy, whose huge wings flapped hard to allow him to hover over them. "He's offered to help," Daphne explained, but this time her diplomacy was falling on deaf ears. "Help us do what? Try on some big pants?" Puck sneered, taking a jab at Jack's recent job. "You weren't supposed to bring him back." "Listen, you little brat, I'm the only hope you've got," Jack replied. "2 little girls and a garden gnome? You aren't going to stop a giant." "Who are you calling a garden gnome?" Puck said, pulling his flute from his sweatshirt. "My royal army knows how to deal with this insolent peasant." "Boys!" Sabrina and Daphne cried in unison. "That's enough!" Puck and Jack backed off. The girls looked at each other. Apparently there was a bit of Granny Relda in them. "What happened to Hampstead and the deputies?" Sabrina asked. "Charming came and picked him up," Puck said, staring a hole into Jack. "I sat up on the roof and watched him scream at them for a half an hour. It was hilarious." "Good. We could use a break," Sabrina said, turning and opening the front door. Elvis rushed past her and into the kitchen, returning a moment later with Granny Relda's handbag. He dropped it at the girl's feet and began to snarl at it. The girls ignored him. Daphne headed into the living room, set the carpet tenderly on the floor, and plopped down, exhausted, into a chair. She pulled a book out from underneath the cushion she was sitting on and tossed it aside. "So, this is the famous Grimm house," Jack said as he wandered from room to room, lifting up photographs and snooping around. Oh, I wish I had a camera with me. No one will believe that I was actually inside. Make yourself at home, please, Sabrina said. If Jack heard the sarcasm in her voice, he pretended not to and continued his snooping. So, girls, where can I take a kip? He asked. Daphne looked at Sabrina for a definition, but Sabrina shook her head. I have no idea what that means. You know, hit the sack, Jack said. You mean you want to take a nap? I'm zonked. We didn't break you out of jail so you could camp out in our house. Kids, I was on a lengthy jail call all night. I need to get some rest, and besides, my big plans can't go into effect until tomorrow anyway. What big plan? Right now, it's best we don't discuss it. Jack fell onto the couch and stretched his arm behind his head. He doesn't even have a plan, Puck snapped. Yes, I do, Jack replied. We'll talk about it later. I just need a couple hours of shut-eye. He closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. Puck looked at the girls, turned and stomped away, slamming the door behind him. What do we do now? Daphne said sleepily. Well, I suppose we might as well get some rest too, Sabrina said, seeing her sister's head bob. She scooped her grandmother's handbag off the floor and set it on the table, then gently urged Daphne out of her chair. Elvis whined at the girls. Sabrina turned and whispered into the dog's ear. Elvis, keep an eye on Jack. The dog's eyes reflected in understanding, and he seated himself like a stone guardian, watching the sleeping man. The two girls went up to their bedroom. It had been a really long day. Woo! That was only part 1. That's not even the whole chapter. We have so much to go. What is going to happen? Is Jack going to actually be able to help? Are Jack and Puck going to fight? Are they going to ever be able to find Granny Relda? Are the deputies? What are they going to do? Why is Charming evil? I have so many questions. Do you guys have so many questions? I have so many questions. Okay. Well, you guys know the answer. You just have to wait and join me again for chapter 8, part 2. See you soon.